we give kudos to Sweden. They topped their group. They took down a very tough U.S. women's national team in terms of just legacy. And obviously, despite how the U.S. women's team played, they obviously have a lot of talented players that you can't just underestimate at all. So Sweden finished that game. And here we are against Japan, one of our favorite teams to win the whole thing. I believe up until this game, they had 14 goals and had only conceded 1. So they're in top form. And Sweden edges out a 2-1 victory. I mean, at this point in time, Sweden have taken down the U.S. and Japan in back-to-back games.
Crazy.
At the World Cup.
Amazing.
I mean, I'm at the point now where I'm like, okay, Sweden doesn't necessarily play a full 90 of pretty football. There are things that they could clean up. There are things that they could probably improve on. But you want to talk about a team that gets the job done and has a tactical game plan and comes out and executes. That's the team. And now I'm like, Sweden can go all the way because that's a smart team that knows how to beat a team like Japan, who knows how to beat a team like the US. These were two teams that were potentially going to win it all. And Sweden has taken them down both in back-to-back games. I'm so overly impressed. Yeah. And now I'm like, have we not talked about Sweden enough?
I mean, I think it's certainly possible. They were always, for me, Sweden was a team that was always kind of up there, but didn't have that extra edge to sort of take it all the way. And I think for them, perhaps this is their time to shine because, runners up at the Olympics, runners up at the last World Cup, they should be runners up for a lot of different things, a lot of different tournaments. And maybe, possibly, of course, we don't want to say for sure, we don't know, but this could be their time to finally get that gold that they've been searching for on the world stage for honestly years. And yeah, like you mentioned, Caroline, sometimes it doesn't have to be the best football all the time because that's impossible. Like you can't play 100% the whole time. But I can't stress enough how much of an accomplishment it is to take the U.S. in penalties. That's a very overwhelming, stressful environment. To take on a very clean, clinical Japan and, basically fluster the Japanese for this game. It was crazy cool. Sweden's fans are also so exciting. They are such a hoot on TikTok. They're so fun. And I think they have it in them now. They have momentum. They have confidence. Look who they just took down. They're going to go into Spain and say, well, why can't we beat the Spanish team? We beat Japan and USA.
You mentioned a good thing about the fact that Sweden had to go into penalties with the U.S. Just imagine how tired their legs are going into Japan. A very fast team, we've said it so many times on this podcast, not only physically fast, but mentally fast. Like you have to be 10 out of 10 on your game to beat this Japanese side. And again, if you've been watching them this entire World Cup, you know exactly what we're talking about. They're just so clinical in every area, in the defense, in the offense, in their passing,
everything.
In the quality, everything. So the fact that this Swedish side came out and did that after playing extra time, after going through penalties, that's a mentally and physically exhausting task to overcome. And then they just, honestly, I'm still in disbelief. Because for me, this game wasn't too long ago. I'm still in disbelief with what happened, and full kudos to Sweden. One thing I want to say is we've said many times on this podcast, can Japan keep that performance going? Can they keep it consistent? Because it's not easy when you're going at that pace of this brilliant style of football and you're winning all these games and you have these stats like 14 goals, 1 conceded, and no team can kind of compete with you. You're beating Spain. What was that game? 4-0?
Yes.
Can they keep that consistent? And today was the first game against Sweden where I feel like they were a little sloppy with their passes. They had a hard time kind of penetrating that Swedish defense zonally in 1v1. They were disrupted by this Swedish side. And I think that maybe not necessarily the pressure, but that ability to stay consistent at such a high top level was hard for them. Where on the flip side, you have Sweden, who had, in my opinion, a very poor game against the US. And sometimes those little wake-up calls, like they happen in the tournament and you go out the next game and you have a very good performance. And we saw that today. It was just kind of this perfect storm where you have two teams that play completely different styles. But today, the Swedish side, kind of took what they needed to take from the US game, improved upon it, had a game plan, flustered the Japanese side defensively. You could tell they were just really forcing errors and just defensively strong. And Japan, I think they leave this tournament with their heads held super high because they were incredible and played some of my favorite football. I'm kind of sad to see them leave this tournament because they were so good. But again, sometimes it's so hard to stay at that top consistent level for an entire World Cup, for an entire month of games. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. And yeah, like you mentioned, it's so unfortunate to see this being the moment that maybe they let it slip through the cracks a little bit because they're such a fabulous team. But so far, Japan hasn't really been tested in this tournament. They've played on top, fluid free this whole time. And now they're coming up against the Swedish team. It's sort of this moment where like, okay, alarm bells are ringing. What do we do? And it's so hard. It's so hard. You get into that mental zone. You're on the pitch again. You're getting a little bit flustered. It's a very high pressure situation. It's do or die. You know that, okay, in the next half, if we don't score a couple of goals, we're going home. And that certainly plays a toll on the players. But again, like, I don't want people to go in now and be like, oh, Japan isn't as good as what we thought they are, because they are exceptional. We are all human beings. We all have our days. Like, example, take this United States team. They didn't have a great tournament, but they're still a great United States squad, obviously, right? So, yeah, but wow, I think it's this idea. You got to be tested occasionally. You got to be in these high-pressure situations, and that's what's going to take you all the way.
If anyone claims that, Japan, everyone was going to think that they were going to win it all and then they didn't and they flopped, they didn't watch a single game. They're just looking at score lines. That's all they're doing. They didn't watch a game, right? Meanwhile, here we've been glued to the television watching every single game, and Japan absolutely deserves the utmost respect. And I think that's why you saw, even after the game, a lot of Swedish players going to console these Japanese women because it was a devastating loss for Japan. And any team who has watched them has a ton of respect for the football they've played. I mean, I do, and I'm watching from home, right? So I just think a very well-played game by both teams. It wasn't Japan's day, but I don't even want to say that because I think Sweden was so good today with their game plan and what they needed to execute. And again, to do that in back-to-back games, full credit to this Sweden side. And now I'm like, I'm so at a loss. Like, who's going to win it all?
Mind blown.
But there's one thing I want to kind of tie in from the Spain and Netherlands game when we say Bierenstein had to score that goal in extra time, right? Because on the flip side, when Paraluelo had the momentum and she ended up scoring, we talk about capitalizing on your chances. On the flip side, when Japan has a moment like a penalty and they're not able to capitalize, and I believe that was in the 75th minute?
Yeah, I was getting to the end.
That's so unfortunate because that would have been a big momentum changer. These are moments that need to, again, at this point in time in the tournament, against teams that are all very, very good, you have to score those moments. And obviously Japan ended up getting their goal in the 87th minute. Imagine if that was tied at 2-2 at that point in time. Chaos. It would have been insane. A little too late for Japan at that point, but we talk about how important defense is and the defensive side of the game, of course, and I really believe that. But in the same breath, if you're not scoring those goals and you're not, again, it's like the theme of this podcast for me, capitalizing on your chances, you're going to get burned. And I think that that's a tough one. I think her name was Riko Ueki, who missed the penalty. I feel for her because, she's putting a lot of that on her shoulders right now. But just these big moments in these big games, I'd say both offensively and defensively, where now teams have to be clinical and very, very smart in everything that they do, because that moment could be a game-changing moment as to whether you advance or you go home.
Certainly. And if that ball at penalty went in the net, we all know how quickly goals can happen. They can happen at the blink of an eye. So that could have, like you said, been the turning point, being the tipping point, where Japan just get that little bit of energy, a little bit of excitement, and hammer a few goals in 10 minutes. Like, we've seen them do that before.
Yeah, exactly.
So you never know. But major kudos to, like, Ueki as well. She came back. She was the one who missed the penalty, and then she ended up scoring the goal for Japan. So good for her to come back and be able to obviously net that one. But you have to wonder, If she got that penalty in, could there have been a few more? Quite possibly. But it is what it is. Obviously, the game is done now. And yeah, it's crazy to think that one shot, one strike, that's it. And how do you practice being clinical, though, in these high pressure situations? I certainly don't know. It seems a lot easier on the television screen than what it is. But again, this is what sends these teams through. And we've seen Spain do that. We've seen Sweden do that. And it's going to be the theme for the rest of the tournament.